And when you do something for the first time in the right way, it's fantastic. And I can remember and I can say, okay, I have the courage to do this again because it went well this time. And even if it doesn't go well next time, I know that it can go well. And that alone makes it worth doing.
Hey, what's going on, you guys? Welcome to another episode of Beckoning Brilliance. I'm your host, Becca. Today I sat down with my friend Victoria. She has truly inspired me since day one of knowing her. She gives 100% to everything that she does and is a great example of making excellence a priority. Today I sat down with her and asked for her advice on giving your personal best, having a winning mindset, what her dating experience has been like as a successful independent woman, how she's been able to find balance in her life while being successful in the corporate world, while also running a business on the side and balancing the relationships in her life. She is truly the definition of goals, so I hope you love this conversation as much as I did. So, let's get into it.
That's me. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Before we get into everything, I want to tell people how we met because we met in person for like 5 minutes. I met you at a Jack Harlow concert in Vegas. I took your
Vegas.
picture. Yeah, I remember I took your picture and then we followed each other on Instagram and like everything that you post about, I literally have like screen recordings and like screenshots of like your advice and your
You're so sweet.
ranting. No, it's true. I was like looking over it and I'm like, she's talking about like productivity and like I don't know. You're just such a boss in every area. You're super fit. You've started like a couple businesses since I started following you. Like you really have your life together. So I'm just going to give you the floor to talk about yourself. And I don't know, have you always been that motivated to like make shit happen out of nothing?
So first, thank you so much for that introduction. It was super sweet. I grew up in a household where it was really incentivized that I perform. A lot of my validation, both from my parents and school, et cetera, all came from, external performance, right? Am I getting good grades? Am I playing really well on the team? And that's kind of like the sum of your value or your, output that's able to be judged when you're a kid, right? And so you get into this whole cycle of like, I must do well so that I am loved. And that turns into different things, as you get older, right? I must be successful. I must be hardworking. I must be all of these things that align with whatever my perception of like the ideal person or like myself at my best or my ideal state. You get really wedded to that. So that's the first component, essentially just being pre-programmed to be like that. And then the second component is certainly something that I have developed myself. So I have always been very motivated. I've always been very type A. That does not always translate to productivity, but it does translate to a love for, an obsession with, a passion for productivity, for working, for creating things and using my brain in a way that feels good, in a way that makes a difference often, and then sometimes just in a way that makes me feel smart. So the productivity itself is something that I have taught myself. I haven't always been very productive, but the discipline I think is something that was instilled really, really young. So can't take full credit for that.
That's amazing. I consider myself to be like an 85 percenter. I've always
I don't
been
know what
someone
that
that
means.
Oh, basically, like I can give like 85% and I know that everything's going to turn out fine. Like that was
Exactly.
my number one feedback growing up. All my teachers would be like, if she just applied herself, because like I could give very minimal effort and I know that I would get A's and I would get good grades. But I think that really screwed me over in my later years when because like I'm self employed. It's all on me to, well, it's on everyone, right? To take full responsibility and be successful and be in charge of our own success. But what just the 85% gets hard for me to commit fully. I think it's always like an out for me. If something does fail, I'm like, oh, well, I didn't give it my all, right? So anyway,
Hmm.
I'm always really impressed that you seem to find something that you really are passionate about and you just really go for it. So how did you develop the discipline in your later years as you got older?
So the first is just through reframing, my brain, right? Looking at productivity, looking at performance in a completely different light. So I think the foundation of it, in order to have like a more healthy or reasonable relationship and therefore a better and more productive relationship with productivity, you need to have defined for yourself what your best self, what your best effort looks like. So for me personally, something that really works is I have from a young age been involved in or introduced to John Wooden. He's a basketball coach from UCLA, prolific. But anyway, he came up with a lot of concepts, and one of them was surrounding like your personal best. So as a kid, my dad would always say, I just need you to do your personal best. And that can be defined in a lot of different ways. For me, I essentially define it as you know, giving everything I have within a reasonable extent, right? Doing the best I can with what I have. And only I know in here, whether or not I've done my personal best. And I tend to be incredibly honest with myself. So that is a really good barometer and a really nice way to kind of saddle yourself into, I'm going to start giving more effort. I am giving a lot of effort, but I don't want to be kind of overtaken by it. I don't want to develop an unhealthy relationship where the only thing that will satisfy me is something that is unattainable. That is really, really important. And then the second is just putting, myself in difficult situations. So when I left high school, I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point. That was like my first stop in college. I transferred to Vanderbilt 2 years into it. So my senior year of high school, I knew that I needed a bit more discipline if I wanted to be successful in the ways that, I want to be successful. It was certainly something that I felt in my life, exactly like you're saying, right? Like 85%. I could always do really well not giving 100%, but when it came time to give 100%, it was almost impossible to do so. I have a hard time. My therapist calls them preferred tasks, right? It's very difficult for me to do anything that I don't want to do, which is a
Correct.
lot of human beings, but some of us struggle with it a little bit more. So part of it was when I was a kid, going back to what I was saying about being very achievement oriented. I was kind of allowed to do whatever I want so long as I performed in the areas that I was expected to perform. So I had an
Hmm.
incredibly long leash. I did basically whatever I wanted to, at least the end of high school. And so I knew if I wanted to go into college and do really well, that my habits were going to have to change, and that in general, my orientation towards life and my willingness to show up needed to change. So I went to the United States Military Academy and I had an exceptional time. And I'll tell you what, that place will teach you
Interesting.
a little bit about discipline.
Yeah.
It might not make you, it might not change you, but
Hmm.
it will give you all of the tools that you need to absorb that, to develop that if that's something you're interested in developing. There has to be a willingness there. And then finally, I would say just through practice, right? The only way to get better at something is to do it. And it's okay to fail. People always say that, but they think that it's something more tangible, right? I'm making something and I can't do it, right? I was asked to do a job and I fell short. No, you could technically fail at anything, but failing doesn't have to have the same meaning that other people give it. Failing isn't losing, failing is a learning experience. And so everything that I do, I try and do it as best as I can. And then the next time I try and do it as best as I can. And generally, my best gets better every time. And if it doesn't, even if it's worse, I know that I have been trending upwards. I know that this is maybe an off day or an off situation, whatever it is, but I can accept it and move on and continue the following time to try my hardest again.
So, was it your idea to go into the military?
It was. It
Interesting.
wasn't
That's
something
so
that
interesting to me.
yeah, it wasn't something that I came up with off the top of my head. I was actually approached by a recruiter. And
Hmm.
so, he introduced me to West Point, and I really had no idea. I knew nothing about the school, which is like really crazy to go to West Point, only a year before not knowing anything about it. Not even a full year, maybe about 9 months. So the recruiter contacted me 9 months later. I was at their like version of basic training. It's called Beast. So yeah, it wasn't exactly my idea, but I saw the opportunity. I also came from a background where paying for college was going to be really difficult. It was not something my parents could help me with.
Hmm.
And because of that 85% mentality, right, I didn't come out of high school with the best grades of all time. So I wasn't going to get into a top tier institution. This was kind of like the best institution that I could go to at the time. And I knew it would serve as a great jumping off point if things didn't work out. But I did in the first, year, 2 years, I did really start to buy in to the concept of like really becoming an Army officer and what that meant, especially coming from a very liberal background in Los Angeles, where people have mixed feelings towards the armed forces,
Hmm.
towards, all of the wonderful public defenders that we have. So it completely changed my perspective of, what these institutions meant, and it made me develop a great respect for them, which is unrelated, but it's always really incredible, to go into something possibly a bit prejudiced, have your
Hmm.
mind changed, be someone who can have their mind changed. That's really important. But yeah, I definitely came out on the other side with a completely different perspective.
That whole world has just never intrigued me. I'm so curious to know like what was exceptional about it.
Whenever an experience is exceptional, I think a lot of it has to be tied to the way someone actually takes advantage or lives that experience themselves, right? So
Hmm.
I personally, my relationship with it was that I did something that I thought was going to be really, really challenging, and it wasn't that hard for me. Not only that, I did something that I really thought was going to be, something I didn't love in the moment. I thought that I was going to have to do these grueling exercises and workouts and whatever, right? Going
Yeah.
into it that I thought it was going to be, and that it would be a huge sacrifice, emotionally, mentally taxing. But it didn't turn out to be. So, I faced a lot of these really big challenges, new challenges, and I overcame them. And I would say one of the most remarkable things about it was my realization of the value and the significance of human suffering, but like physical pain, right? You
Mm-hmm.
go, I have done so many difficult things, right? We've all lost sleep, lost weight because we were stressed out and working hard, all of these things. But in this particular case, sometimes you're carrying, a 40-pound ruck and you're just trying to make it up the hill. And in those moments, nothing has been for me personally more difficult than pushing past extreme physical pain. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're able to do that, I feel like your mind just goes into a completely different state. Not only that, but I have such great respect for professional athletes, anyone who uses their body for work because,
Mm-hmm.
I work out, I've done bodybuilding competitions, triathlon, everything, nothing compared to that. When you're training yourself, you push yourself to your limit, past your limit, but you'll never push yourself past your limit the way someone else will.
Speaking of doing hard things, something that's always really fascinated me about you is you go on these like, kind of like rants on your stories. And something that I found really inspiring was I feel like there's been like job opportunities or just different opportunities in your life that even if you don't know how to do it, you're like, I'm just still going to say yes and I'll figure it out. And I'm like, I fucking love that. Like, I know that as I was doing a deep dive on your Instagram, I saw that you, like I said, you started your own like clothing line and you're like, I watched a ton of YouTube videos and figured out how to do it. I just really admire that attitude that you have in life as far as going for something. So I would assume that it also kind of set you up to like when you do hard things and you succeed and things are easier than you think that they're going to be, obviously it like sets up your mind to be like, well, what else can I achieve?
Exactly. Absolutely. And then the other thing is finding a purpose in everything you do. Obviously, you can't find a purpose in everything, right? But in large ventures, if you're going to take something on, if you're going to start a business, if you're going to begin an entrepreneurial endeavor, you have to have a purpose, and the purpose has to be personal to a certain extent, right? You can't just be in something to make money. That's just not how it works. Now, for me, the clothing line was technically the second business I've started because I started a personal training business when I was in college and did a lot of
Okay.
that. But it was, with the intent of actually building out my resume to apply to grad school. So there was certainly purpose there. And a lot of my motivations are tied to some sort of like planning or objective or anything that I have kind of mapped out, which is pretty much everything. But yeah, a really great technique for any type of like career planning, school applications is, if you're envisioning something later down the line, you want to apply to business school 2 years down the line. Okay, great. What I did was I went online and I learned everything about the schools that I was interested in. Okay, what are the average GMAT scores? What are the average curriculars? What do people graduate undergrad with in terms of GPA? And then I started reading the profiles on the websites of some of the candidates or some of the actual graduates who, the schools are broadcasting, right? So they must be ideal. And so at that time, I kind of looked at their accomplishments and I thought to myself, what are some equivalent or more impressive, for me personally, that I think are greater accomplishments that I can, achieve, that I can do between now and when I want to apply? And I just made that application. So I wrote out, so I created a fake, mock application complete with
Mm-hmm.
resume and looked at the different, essays as well. And so what I did was I made it as the ideal candidate, the best version of myself that I could be at the time. And then
Mm-hmm.
I worked backwards. If I want to, spend 3 or 4 years with a nonprofit in some way, right? Well, I need to do that now. What nonprofit am I interested in? What complements my background, my history, where I want to go? I want to tell a story. In the corporate world, when you're presenting yourself, you're telling a story about who you are and you want to be a complete person. But, the specifics of what those things are going to be personal and they're going to be, depend on the individual. So that work backwards technique is really exceptional. And it allows you to kind of just figure out what you need to do today to achieve something in the future, which can really honestly be the hardest part. A lot of our questions are like, how do I get there? And if you're just freestyling, as I like to say, you might end up in some amazing places because I freestyle a lot and that has happened for me. But in terms of if you have somewhere you need to go, you need to map it, period.
I'm not good about doing that.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but for me personally, I think part of what ties into what I consider my success, right,
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that I love these things. And I think a lot of it is personality. So if you are not someone who is motivated, by being in groups, working in groups, being in front of individuals, presenting, a lot of the things that I've done, right? Then that particular job, software consulting might not be for you. If you don't like writing, there's certain professions that aren't for you, right? It,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how motivated or determined you are. You have to get in where you fit in, where you feel good. You have to swim with the current, I always say.
Seeing as how you have your life together so fully, and I don't know, you just command so much authority. Has it been hard for you to date?
Mm. Uh,
I feel like there's a lot of men that probably would be like really intimidated by you.
so it was hard to date, I would say, when I first started my job consulting. The main reason is because I was traveling a lot, which is pretty consistent with my
Okay.
job. Now, I did have a really interesting, strong independent woman realization surrounding that kind
Mm-hmm.
of opened the door to understanding how I can better approach dating for, to not scare off people because, that should never happen, but more so to demonstrate or to kind of package my life and show people who I am in a way that was a better representation of just like my job title and like what I do and how often I would be able to see you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
initially, I had this guy that I was seeing and I really liked him and we were getting along great. And then, kind of randomly, he called me one day and he told me that he just didn't think that it was, going to work because I was never around. And he
Mm-hmm.
missed me and he hated me being gone. And I was like, oh my gosh, this whole time everybody's talking about, oh, I want a woman who, like, makes her own money. And,
Yeah.
I don't need them technically for anything,
Mm-hmm.
monetary or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So I was really surprised. I was like, wow, I have like all the assets, I'd always like heard of slash been afraid of like I don't want to be perceived as a woman who depends on someone else or like, like a leech. That's just a
Yeah.
personal, I think it surrounds like an insecurity of maybe something I saw when I was younger or something I've internalized, but it's a really big thing for me. And so I was really excited. I thought I was going to have more options than ever, but that really wasn't the case. So essentially, what I started doing was one, being a little bit more upfront about what I was doing, I don't know, the things that I could bring into a relationship, the things that I didn't think I could bring, and then using that kind of as a jumping off point to determine whether or not people were a good fit. I think a lot of times people say, okay, I have this list of must-haves for partners, and usually when you first
Mm-hmm.
meet someone, it's going to be like looks, sense of humor, maybe even style, 'cause I'm talking about like, their face, etc., their job,
Mm-hmm.
how much money they have, things like that. And so they don't think about lifestyle, if our lifestyles are a good fit. And that's super
So
important.
true.
And you don't want to get to the point where you're super fond of someone, where you have a relationship and then you guys start to get more serious, you start planning things together. And then once you get to that planning phase, right, that cohesion phase, you realize that there's a disconnect. So I definitely kind of shifted my perception on what it is that I need, how I can communicate that to other people, and how to be realistic and let myself let things go when they don't fit, even if I want them to. I have a couple diagnoses, and when I was first diagnosed, it was like back when I was 19, right? So I hadn't like really done a lot of serious dating at that point. So I had to formulate my whole plan of like, how am I going to date people, with these issues, all of these, I don't know, kind of things that I was embarrassed of, things that I didn't want to be, things I
Yeah.
was afraid people are going to judge me for being. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have never had to shift my dating approach because I've always considered that. But being someone, with mental health obstacles, it's really important that we have the correct partners, partners who are understanding, partners who have kind of exposure to or experience in that area who aren't completely new to mental health. I find that to be a little bit more difficult, right? If someone has absolutely no psychoeducation, it becomes
Hmm.
difficult when your mental illness or your diagnosis is a big part of your life, which I think it is for a lot of people, even if we don't
Hmm.
actively suffer some of the symptoms on the day to day. So for me personally, I had to make a decision, when am I going to tell people about my mental health situation, right? At what point do I
Right.
communicate this to people? And at first I thought, I should really be upfront. I should tell people, right off, in the beginning, off the bat.
Hmm.
And I actually decided against that eventually because for me, I have a bipolar 2 diagnosis, but I've been on medication for, 10 years. And I
Hmm.
love my medication. My medication works. I have an exceptional quality of life, one that I would never have without it. And therefore, my bipolar disorder doesn't impact my life the way that it used to before I was on medication. It does
Hmm.
in some ways, but not ways that, drastically affect me. They're little things that I might notice. They're things I can correct for. So I like to give people an opportunity to get to know me and see that like I'm normal, right? Before I tell them. Because if you tell
Yeah.
someone, I have a bipolar 2 diagnosis, I've been on medication, my medication's effective, and I really don't deal with it. And they
Hmm.
can look at you, and I'm not saying everybody does this, but my fear, right? People are going to look at me and start picking apart my behaviors and my actions and judging.
Sure.
They're forming a
Sure.
conception of me included with or including my mental health diagnoses. And so I was like, I don't want that to happen because I am not my mental health diagnoses. They are not my personality, and it is not a big part of my relationship with anyone. It doesn't have to do with it. So I'm gonna let someone
Hmm.
just know who I am, let them form their conception of me, and then I might introduce them to the information, at whatever point. So that is something that I definitely decided to do in regards to my mental health and just making sure that I have partners who are understanding. More often than not, people will just say, I've dealt with that, or I've diagnosed, or I know
Hmm.
someone who was diagnosed with that, or in general, right? And they might ask questions. It's also not a huge fear was that like people are going to ask questions and dig into things and ask questions that make me uncomfortable and might reveal some things about my past or things that I've experienced that I don't really want to communicate. But
Sure.
that really hasn't been my experience whatsoever. People are genuinely curious. People want to know how to support you, how to understand you, how to
Right.
interact with you. And so if you give it that context, that I am better equipping someone to have a relationship with me, a productive relationship, then all the fear kind of goes away, right? And it is really as simple when you give someone a bit of psychoeducation or encourage them to educate themselves. It really is as simple as telling them, this is what I need in these circumstances. Sometimes I feel
Hmm.
like this, and when I feel like this, it's easier, for me if you do this. These are things that I had to explain, to my current partner. And so in
Hmm.
doing that, we came up with a lot of really incredible techniques and ways of communicating things that were causing conflict, that were causing issues, that were making us uncomfortable or triggering us, and be able to relay it to the person in the moment in a way that doesn't upset them or trigger them or make them feel self-conscious in any way. And then, since we've agreed on this in a moment when we were together, we're in a state of love making this decision together, that it's easier for me to accept when someone says like, I need to take a break from you right now, or it's probably best that we spend a little bit of time apart. I'm going to go in the other room because we don't want this conflict to go any further. In the past, that would have
Hmm.
been like, you're running away from this, you're not talking to me, whatever that is, right? But
Yeah.
now it's a healthy, positive thing. So that's just one example of some of the ways that, I've helped my partner help me. And this doesn't just have to do with mental health, but just in general, this is really valuable if for anyone who's dating or really any relationship.
I was gonna say you seem like you're such a good communicator. I think that's like the hardest part for me is everyone has different like attachment styles and like how they deal with conflict. So I always tend to shut down and it's hard for me to talk. So I admire the fact that you have a system to help you guys work through those conflicts quite easily.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there was a lot of butting heads that had to happen, right? As in any relationship before we could figure those things out. They didn't come out of nowhere, right? We had to solve problems. And often that's, something people don't think about, right? A lot of relationships are problem solving. It's worth understanding, what's the mental health state of you and your partner? Where are you
Hmm.
guys compared to one another? And that might help you better understand how to approach certain issues. When people are in certain spaces, they can't hear things. Where we are in life, spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, really determines the lens that we see things through. And in order to be a really good partner, friend, daughter, girlfriend, it's important to take the time to think about those things. Think about things from someone else's perspective. If someone's saying something to you in a way that they don't typically say things, if someone's acting out of character, I like to ask myself, do I know anything that might inform, my decision of how to respond to this? Because it might not change what I do. And if someone's behavior is, irrational or inappropriate or offensive, right? Just not within the bounds of what our relationship contract is, and often it's unspoken. The response is going to be the same. However, it is great for me to come to a place of trying to get a little bit more understanding, kind of just lower my temper, perhaps, give myself a little bit of space, give that person a little bit of grace, and then approach it, right? Rather than just making up a story in my head about what that meant and why it was done.
I know that you guys had started a business together. I know you guys live together. So, what do you do to take care of yourself and have your own like alone time?
This is a great question. Pete and I, we do. We both work from home right now. We own a business
Hmm.
together, and obviously we live together. So
Yeah.
we are together a lot of time, most of the
Hmm.
time. And I would say more than 99% of couples that I know. One, I think even being able to be in that situation and be happy and fulfilled with your partner, you have to have the right partner. There are certain people with certain personalities and partnerships, and their relationships just allow them to be like that. Some people, no matter how right their partner is for them, would never be able to survive in that situation because that's just not who they are, right? So that's just us in
Hmm.
general.
Yeah.
And, actually, the alone time is something that we are still working on. When we were in the full swing of running our pie business, both of us baking every single day, beholden to our customers, we couldn't get any alone time. I mean, we
Hmm.
worked, we didn't like take a day off for over a year, right? And that's its own issue, right? That's something to address and has been addressed,
Yeah.
right? That's its own thing. But it did,
Hmm.
affect the fact that we didn't have a lot of alone time. But more importantly, we weren't able to practice alone time, to get used to alone time, which is really important in relationships because a dynamic of codependency can develop. I think it does in a lot of relationships. It's not always as
For sure.
detrimental and horrible as people make it sound, right? But codependency is an aspect of a lot of relationships. And so getting in those positive habits early in the relationship is really important because you also build trust around habits. So when you tell your partner, hey, I'm going to spend some time apart, I'm going to go stay with a friend for a day, or I'm going to do this for 2 days, or even I'm just going to go to the store by myself, in those moments, you're taking autonomy. You're taking the place of, half of the relationship saying, I need space. And in that moment, your partner is trusting you to take that space. And it seems something so simple, right? And I'm not saying like, your partner needs to trust you to leave the house or not think every time you leave the house you're going to cheat on them. It's not that. It's just like things become comfortable, things become routine, and things become your relationship standards. And when you have established really great relationship standards and expectations, relationships are easier. Things flow.
Hmm.
You've already determined, how you're going to solve certain problems. So kind of looping back to how I'm getting my personal space, we do a couple of things. One, I've developed a thing that I call, actually Pete might have named it together but separate. So what that means is like, I love you, I'm happy to be with you. I don't want to go anywhere or leave the
Hmm.
house, but I don't need to be physically interacting with you and looking at you right now. And so
Yeah.
we're in separate rooms, or sometimes we're in the same room, but it's just kind of like a do not disturb thing, kind of like if I was
Hmm.
working and, it's like, okay, give me some space. And then if you need anything, obviously you can come. But sometimes, if we need to, we might have like separate time, for a period of time. We don't usually put time on it. Some couples really benefit from making it time bound. I'm someone where my
Hmm.
needs are constantly changing, so I can't really do that. And then just encouraging each other to like have friends, to spend time with friends outside of the relationship. For me, I am huge on female relationships. My female friendships are invaluable and they are a huge part of my life. And so keeping and maintaining those relationships, making my friends feel seen and loved by me is a priority. And it's great because it also makes me get out of the house. And sometimes, my friends can come over and they can see Pete or spend time with Pete, but it's so important to have relationships separate, from your romantic
Hmm.
relationship. And then also just like, going out and spending time with my brother, him spending time with his family. Last week I went and I did
Hmm.
a sleepover and I slept at my mom's. And so those little things. And then also, I would say if you're the type of person who needs alone time just to recharge, that's me, right? I have to
Mhm.
have continued, uninterrupted alone time to kind of bring my battery back.
Yeah,
You
for
get
sure.
it. So for those people in talking about kind of setting expectations, it might be great to have a certain type of activity you like to do that you do alone. So, for example, what I did a lot when I was drinking coffee, I'm not anymore, but I would wake up every morning before work and I would like just go get a cup of coffee by myself while Pete was asleep. And that was really important time for me. And just having those things that you do solo, it's carving out time for yourself, it's giving yourself something to look forward to with yourself and it's good for the relationship. Alone time is always good for a relationship.
I agree. Is it important for you to have similar hobbies to whoever you're dating? Because I feel like you have a lot of different interests, like going to the gym. You're a plant mom. I know you like to read. You play video games. Do you guys have those interests in common, or do you think like opposites attract?
This is a great question because I have a completely new perspective on this. So,
Hmm.
I have historically dated people who, kind of worldview, sense of humor, all of the like inside of the brain, we really are similar, but lifestyle wise, we can be really different. So
Hmm.
I luckily am the type of person where I love doing things with people that they love. Now, there's certain things that I'm not passionate about. One of them being camping, right? I could never, literally never date someone who wanted to or expected me to go camping on even a yearly
Yeah.
basis. That just would never happen. But it's funny because Pete's passions, Pete's interests, are
Hmm.
literally exactly what I said I don't like. So going into it, I'm like, I hate politics. I don't game. I don't do anything like that. I'm
Hmm.
not even, I wasn't really even on the computer a whole lot. And then he's really big history buff. I'm like, this is literally everything I don't like. I think I used the word hate at
Yeah.
the time. The idea of listening to him
Okay.
talk about any of this, when we first met, I was like, I am just going to die. I don't know how this is going to work, but I just love this guy. And
Yeah.
so that's looking at, wasn't the lifestyle compatibility, but that is looking at a bit of a compatibility. And it turns out, that I like a lot of the things that he likes. And if there is
Hmm.
something that you don't love, why don't you take the time to experience it with someone who loves it? And you will have a
True.
completely new perspective. So, for example, Pete, there's this like series on YouTube that he likes that's just like it's a history channel and they do really I think it's a military history channel and they just map out really cool battles. It's actually really awesome. And it's super interesting. I never thought I would like it. And I'm the type of person where I did not do exceptionally well in history in high school. I have trouble memorizing facts, and I'm not saying that I've memorized all the facts from
Hmm.
the videos that I've watched, but I actually really have gotten into military history in a way that I wasn't, interested in it before. It is not a passion of mine. I don't initiate watching these videos typically, but it is something that I have come to be like, oh, you know what? I really understand why he likes that, and I can experience it and enjoy it too when I choose. And then the video games, I've dated a lot of gamers. I've got to say, for anyone who's out there, like, I don't like dating guys who game. Why? Okay, truly, the thing I love most about gamers is the same thing I love about golfers. They have built-in solo time and a solo activity or a social activity that they can do. So if you ever need alone time, you can put your gamer boyfriend on the game and you're a hero. People are like, oh, my boyfriend games all the time. I hate it. I'm like, oh my gosh. I love when Pete games. We game together a lot, and he did actually find
Hmm.
some games that I'm super passionate about. And, I really play one of them. But it's so good when you have a partner who has an activity that they really like, that's easy for them to do, especially in the house, that can keep them fully occupied and give you some space. So yeah, that's another perspective, right? If there's something that your partner really
Hmm.
loves and you don't love it, it might be an opportunity for you to have some alone time.
That's a good point. I have been one of those people that says I don't want to date someone that games, so
Oh, really?
maybe make me rethink that. I guess I just always, this is probably gonna sound shitty, but obviously not you or your boyfriend. But I think like the image that I have in my head of gamers or like people that I've known historically, they've kind of been like the stereotype of like, like live in their mom's basement, like
Hmm.
lazy, unmotivated. But obviously I know that's not everyone.
Yeah, you're right. And it's the same thing as like, right, when people find me on Instagram or I meet people on Instagram, and it's
Mhm.
just, a curated little conception of what I am. And if I fall into like, oh, you're an Instagram girl, people say things like, "Oh, you should start an OnlyFans," whatever. It's like, no, that's not who I am. That's not really like my vibe. But you wouldn't know that because you just
Yeah.
see me as like, a girl on Instagram posting trying to look cute. So yeah, absolutely. But those guys exist. Those guys exist. Those women exist. The basement dweller gamers.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, they do.
Going back to like productivity and everything, like what does an average day look like for you? Because every time I like watch your stories, I'm like, you're like, I worked for 12 hours, I worked out, I have like your own business. Tell me more about that, please.
So I will say the day to day really varies. And I do a lot of different jobs, and the day to day really greatly depends on my job. I would say the thing that varies the greatest, and that is the thing that is like the most significant, is just the time I wake up. People underestimate how important it is to just have a set wake up time. Set bedtimes are real hard. No one knows how the day is going to go, but set wake up times you can do. When you do it for long enough, you'll just wake up. So I'm not a morning person, but I've worked a couple jobs in the last couple of years where I'm working with teams who are in different countries or, on the East Coast. So I
Hmm.
was routinely waking up at 6 a.m. or like 5:50 for a while, which is not it's not my jam, it's not my vibe. So I'd wake up, and
Right.
then if you're the person, if you live with people or, you have a partner you live with and you're the person who wakes up first, soak it up, love that time. Really important for me to get grounded in the morning. I have my whole, ideal list of things I'm going to do, right? I have the perfect morning mapped out. And in my best moments, in the moments where I want to, I do it. I don't bully myself for not doing it. But
Hmm.
generally every day, like I'll wake up, I'll have a glass of hot water and lemon, I'll kind of like putz about, get things ready. Generally, when I wake up, I like go in the kitchen and I collect anything that's like dirty or whatever, and I like sequester it, like a quick wipe up because we eat really late at night and we snack and we're crazy, and so sometimes we don't have time to clean up before we wake up. And so I like to handle that first thing in the morning. And then I'll take a shower, I'll do my own skincare routine, all my face massage, stuff like that. And then I'll like sit down and get working. And what I have started to do, I'm sure you've seen ads online like millionaire CEOs, they time chunk, they do blah, 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 blah. I actually heard about time chunking from someone I
Uh-huh.
follow on Instagram that I really admire, actually. I really admire. And her name is Sarah Bomar, and she has just built a complete empire, starting with social media marketing on Instagram for fitness. And she's the first person I ever heard talk about time chunking. And
Hmm.
for those people who don't know, it's kind of just isolating tasks and pre-deciding or pre-allocating time to complete those tasks, which requires you to kind of assess the task beforehand to determine how much time it's going to actually take and the level of effort that it's going to require, which also, for me personally, subconsciously motivates me and better prepares me to do the job. I'm the type of person I say, like,
Hmm.
I need 3 days to emotionally prepare to hang out. So don't ask me to do anything last minute. This is the same concept, right? I think a lot of this has to do
Yeah.
with people who are 85 percenters. It's like, I need
Hmm.
to get warmed up to do something. And the warm
Totally.
up's in here. So that really helps. So I'll time chunk. Now, to be honest, I'm not super productive for work in the morning and in the first half of the day. I like to get all the things that I need to do done, chores wise, done in the first half of the day. And then the second half of the day is when I really start to work. And so something I really like is I use a timer. It's also another technique. It's called Pomodoro. So you have certain prescriptive blocks of work time that are separated by short breaks. Then after a certain number of iterations, you have a longer break. And it's tied in with, how the brain works and productivity, et cetera. There's science behind it. Checks out for me. I didn't read the studies, but it worked for me. And I do that
Hmm.
when I really need to get something done. Like if I need to work as much as I possibly can in a day, which sometimes happens for my job, it's just not an option, then I'll do Pomodoro technique and I can work, for 12 hours. Now, granted, there are breaks, but I can work for 12 hours. And then I usually eat a pretty late dinner. I prefer to go to the gym around 3 p.m., like 2, 3. That's when I first start getting energy. So I love to work out then. And then
Hmm.
my partner and I, we make dinner every night together. So we'll typically, make a dinner, pre-plan, we'll go to the store, we'll get things. And then I like to unwind by, we take walks, playing games, watching movies, TV shows. I was never a media consumer prior to meeting Pete, but he works in entertainment and I've fallen in love with it. I live a very streamlined, simple life right now, but it's full of things that I love and I enjoy and things that make me proud of my life. So it works.
That's amazing. It's very Virgo of you. I love it. This is slightly off topic, but it popped in my head when you were talking about work stuff. Like, is this like a guy's game, like in the corporate setting? Is there any sexism? Like, do you ever have to deal with any of that bullshit?
I've been really fortunate to work on projects and in companies where I have very supportive leadership and peers. So
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had to deal with too much sexism, overt sexism, and certainly none from within my company, but clients, yes. And I also, when I started my consulting job, I think I'd been on the job for like 4 months. And I had a lot of these questions and concerns as well, right? What is it going to be like as a woman in this space, especially as a Black woman, especially as a young Black woman?
Mm-hmm.
And I was really gung ho, can't be too soft, got to represent. It's a man's industry right now. Software consulting is largely dominated by men, and especially white men who are older. And so I thought about it and I was like, I can't show any weakness. And then about 4 months
Yeah.
into my first project, I had an incident with someone I was working with, and I had to report them for sexual, like a sexual infraction, right? Some inappropriate
Mm-hmm.
behavior. It wasn't an assault situation, but it was very like inappropriate language. And it was so frustrating because to me, I have seen so many women villainized for being open and upfront about things that they've experienced, in the workplace in general. And I just did
Mm-hmm.
not want to have a scarlet letter. I did not want to be seen as, less than or dramatic or someone who's just trying to cause problems. And my leadership was so supportive. They thanked me that I came forward. They thanked me, that
Good.
I had shared this information because the fact of the matter is that in communities where people are dedicated to protecting one another, a danger to one person is a danger to everybody. So that was handled really well and succinctly and really motivated me and kind of instilled in me that I always speak up. That's something that I'd always done. But in those moments when there's new obstacles, you have to make a split second decision or, mull it over and say, like, am I going to do this? And when you do something for the first time in the right way, it's fantastic. And I can remember and I can say, okay, I have the courage to do this again because it went well this time. And even if it doesn't go well next time, I know that it can go well. And that alone makes it worth doing.
Amazing. So, tying in career with your love of electronics, how do you feel about AI takeover and like ChatGPT as far as productivity?
Oh my gosh, ChatGPT is amazing. I think the first thing I
Mm-hmm.
think is like a lot of people are scared, right? That it's going to change or take their job in some way. And it will.
Yeah.
It will for a lot of jobs, mine included. But it's actually helped me in work a lot. There's a lot of busy work on the corporate side, at least in what I do. That's a lot of like writing and drafting that's not particularly interesting or novel. It doesn't require a lot of creative input or thought for people who are interested in using ChatGPT or any AI models, I would say that it really is amazing at creating kind of a first draft. Now you have to learn if you've tried to use AI and it hasn't worked well for you, I would say do a little research online on kind of how to give prompts, how to communicate with the AI to better allow it, to kind of work with you. But there are a couple AI tools that I really, really love. So the first is obviously ChatGPT, just
Mm-hmm.
perfect. Jasper is another that I use a lot. Then there's another called Otter. So I'm really big about like productivity tips and tricks and hacks, and software comes into a lot of it. So I was working on a project and working with someone who just a lot of conversation. And I don't know if there's some certain people that you speak to that it's like feels almost a little bit uncomfortable to like take notes while they're speaking because they like demand so much attention.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, I need a software that like records and transcribes and whatever, so I can just like look at notes later. And I got this software, and it actually is even more incredible than that because it'll like chunk, it identifies different speakers, it'll give you timestamps so you can click and just like navigate to the part that you're interested in. It can give
Mm-hmm.
summaries, so that's amazing. And then yeah, it's just Otter spelled typically then AI. And then there's another called Knowledge, and I believe it's Knowlej. And this is probably the most remarkable AI tool that I've seen so far. And it is one that allows you to essentially create study guides, training courses, basically based on any type of media you can upload. So you can do YouTube links, you can do links to websites, you can upload videos, documents, anything. And what it will do is analyze it and it'll generate like essentially a training course. So you can do, it'll make flashcards, quizzes, word crosswords, summaries, keywords, everything. And that is incredibly useful, not necessarily just for people who would use it, if you think intuitively, right? Like, I'm trying to teach myself something, right? But people who are interested in creating businesses where they're selling knowledge. Think like ebooks, right? I'm in the process of
Hmm.
creating a couple ebooks. Actually, I haven't told anyone this, that are centered around a lot of, business development, career trajectory, interviews, resumes, things that I do for people for free, things people pay me to do that I love to do, things I'm good at. So using AI to kind of help structure that, a lot of times, if you, even something like this, right? If I were to spew a ton of knowledge and be like, that's really valuable, I want to put it, in my whatever, in my book, my ebook, I could just upload this video and it would pull out the relevant parts. So that is something that people should really take advantage of. And then the final one, and I'm going to just have to look really quickly, it is memory. So it is an extension or add-on to another software that I can't remember off the top of my head, but regardless, it tracks all of your behaviors on your computer, your searches, etc. And it does that kind of time chunking thing where it identifies the activity, you can label it, you can see how you spent your time. You can also create tasks. And while you're doing them, it will log them and you can categorize them and label them so that you can see exactly how much time you spent working. This is also really valuable for people who have to track their time and the work that they do for billing. And it integrates with your calendar. It's really intelligent. I'm not doing it justice, but certainly if you're someone who struggles with time blindness, which is huge for me, late to meetings all the time, and a lot of emails and a lot of different calendars, you have to use it. You have to use it.
I definitely fall into the category of being like, I feel like this is like kind of freaky. Like I've always like seen like the benefit to a certain extent, but
Mm-hmm.
everything you just told me about sounds incredible. So thank you for sharing all that with us. I have one final question for
Sure.
you. I saw as I was deep diving on your Instagram, I saw this quote and it stuck out to me. You wrote, "I draw energy from that which I love." So what do you love right now that you're drawing energy from?
So love and passion are really intertwined for me. First and foremost, my love is the people that I have in my life. So I'm passionate about my relationships, and it sounds kind of like, okay, yeah, you love people, obviously. But love is a verb. Love can be a verb, it influences what I do, how I communicate. I'm the type of person where I want to make sure everybody in my life is like taken care of, and especially emotionally because that costs me nothing. And so I reach out to people. Like I make it a point, reach out to people, ask what they're doing, check in, see if they're okay. It's a lot. You can tell I'm the type of person where I'm juggling a lot of things in my head, but I'm able to. So investing in that is really big. And then, another thing that I'm really loving is just having a new relationship with exercise. I am someone who I competed in bodybuilding and powerlifting. I played volleyball through my life in college, all of the above. I've always been an athlete and I've always had some type of goal attached. And if you recall, I said that, it's important to put purpose behind everything. But like if you're at a
Mm-hmm.
place, right, where you're generally happy with your, physical state and there's no like accomplishment you're training for, any competition, it kind of becomes groundless. And I lost a lot of motivation to exercise during COVID. And someone who's worked out almost every day for like 10 years, it was really nuts. I went about a year without exercising nearly at all. And it was like losing part of my identity, honestly. But it
Mm-hmm.
really made me ask myself, like, what am I doing this for? And I'd never, ever had like my fitness has never been motivated by health, to be completely honest, right? It was very much like, I'm young, I want to be hot, I want to be an IG fitness kind of girl.
Yeah.
And then those are also just byproducts of loving exercise. But it has never really truly been about health. Performance, perhaps, but never health. And I don't know, I've just been on a kick lately, maybe because I'm like closing in on 30, but just some of the people I follow, I love all of the wealth of information I'm getting on the internet about self-care, but not just like mental self-care, but like physical self-care as well. Coming at it from a perspective of like, I want my body to work, I want my body to support me and last, as long as I live, and just kind of reframing and not. Part of it was like if I don't have a huge competition I'm training for, it's difficult to push myself really, really hard. But then I realized like I don't have to, I don't have to at all.
Well, I'm closing in on 40, so all of your posts are always like super inspiring to me. I'm like,
You're
I'll look at your
closing in
little
on
like,
40.
dude, I'm 38. You know that.
No, I just didn't know. I thought you were like
I have
maybe 5 years older than me. This is genuine surprise. I had no idea.
I've definitely told you, so maybe you've just like blocked it out of your memory, which is fine. I'm fine with that. You can be in denial about my age because I
Yeah,
am.
I'm in denial, I guess. That's so,
Yeah.
yeah, it just didn't land, so I just ignored it, I suppose.
It's all good. I'll take it. But anyway, all of your posts are so inspiring because I'm like, damn, I wish I looked like that. Maybe I should work out. Maybe I should, get up off my ass and work out. I
Yeah.
try to work out like 5 days a week, but obviously I'm not doing the most. I'm not doing enough.
But
So
honestly, for me, I have come to the conclusion that exercise, it's so important that we be able to exercise, right? That we have the
of
willingness to
course.
exercise. We might not have it right now, but that is all influenced with our relationship with exercise. So personally,
Hmm.
I get to the gym and I try and motivate myself if I don't really feel like working out, right? I don't want to
Right.
work out even more than 50% of the time. I think I'm like, oh, I would like to stay home and keep doing what I'm doing. But,
Yeah.
if I ever go to the gym and I'm just having a really bad workout, or I'm just angry and I'm not being productive and I'm starting to build a resentment against what I'm doing, I leave. I leave because
Really?
it is so important that fitness remain positive for me in my life. It's so important that I
Hmm.
enjoy it. I feel that way about everything that is meaningful and important that I do, right? If I don't have to do it, then I'm not going to do it when it's a negative experience. I don't want to put negativity or, I don't want to condition myself out of doing something that's important. And part of the way to do that is to respect yourself and know when you need space from it. And that it's a great excuse to not do anything. Trust me, I used that as an excuse to not exercise
I
at
know. I'm
all
like,
for a
hmm.
while. But just like also exploring the things that, I don't know, you're passionate about that light you up, that fire you up, and it takes a lot of dabbling. As I said, I've tried a lot of different things that, I wanted to see if I was good at or I wanted to see if I could do, and I ended up really enjoying some of it, not so much. Like in the triathlon when I was in the pool, I used to cry every day. Yeah, I hated it, but there was a goal in mind. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
I would say anyone who's like just getting started on a fitness, plan, or, for anyone who has goals of starting to work out or be healthier or anything of the sort, I don't have any advice as to what you should do in terms of like the exercise and what you should eat. However, what I will say is that start slow, because so much in life in regards to like discipline and accomplishment has to do with building confidence. So part of building confidence is setting yourself up for success, not putting yourself in situations where the chance of failure is likely when you don't have to be doing it in the first place. No one said you have to go work out. So if you're making the decision to do it for yourself, set goals that are attainable and easy and then build upon those. And what that looks like, right? Just practically. Everybody says that, right? Practically. Then if you start a fitness plan, don't start a diet plan at the same time. Choose, right? Choose one.
Hmm.
Typically, I say
Yeah.
people should kind of align to diet, diet not being like a prescribed thing of what you're eating, but like a changed
Sure.
behavior, right? Like whatever your
Right.
orientation is towards food that you want it to be, get it there first, get used to that, and then start working out, because working out, changes your relationship with food. It changes your hunger levels. You need to have that ironed out.
Sure.
And then
That's so
spend
true.
a period of time just getting to the gym. It doesn't matter what you do. Go, be there for 10 minutes. Get in the habit of going and congratulate yourself when you do. Seriously. And then maybe then you start doing a couple different exercises and you build your confidence doing those. It doesn't matter what you read if someone says you need to do all these different types of exercises, right, to hit these different body parts, and forget it. Forget it. Because nothing is worth doing if you're not going to do it, if that makes sense. Do
It
things
does make sense.
and start things that you can and you want to finish, and make it easy for yourself to finish, and then continue, because by that point, right, when you're in full swing and you're eating, however you want to eat, and you're whatever, sometimes messing up and giving yourself, some space and grace on that, then you will already be at a point where you are so confident in your ability to do what you set out to do, and that is all informed
Hmm.
by the decisions you made of where to start.
Amen. I love it. Well, speaking of confidence, I still remember when I reached out to you and asked you to do this podcast. I love what you said. You're like, I'm going to kill it. I was like, I know you are. I know you are. That's why I
I
asked
love
you.
doing this. I love it.
So you did kill it. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you if they want to follow you and learn more about you?
So you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is MantaFox, Manta like Manta Ray, and then Fox with two X's. And then, if people have any questions or want some input on just some of the things we talked about, particularly career direction, kind of setting yourself up for success in that way for making a change in industry, if you just don't know how to approach things, I would say send me an email. Like I do a lot of independent consulting for people in this realm, and I also give a lot of free advice. So my email is Victoria, spelled conventionally, D as in Delta, and then Pearson, Pearson. That's me, at gmail.com.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate your time. You're amazing, and I can't wait to see what else you accomplish because you've already done so much in the short time that I've known you. So
Thank you.
you're the shit.
Thank you for
Yeah, of
having me.
course.
It's been really fun. And I love this podcast. I love this podcast.
Oh, thank you. I like don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I feel like every week I'm like, all right, let's just see what
No, you're
happens.
great.
But oh, thank you. I hope I get like better at it. But I just keep on having people on that I think are amazing, and I'm like, I'm just gonna let you talk. And
Your guests have been amazing.
oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I'll add you to the list too
Yeah.
because you've also been amazing.
Thank
So
you.
yeah. Well, everyone out there, until next time, stay brilliant.